Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our review of the next installment in the huluween series. You know, their kind of festival that they do every year of just putting out some original horror films. Started with shorts. This year we've already reviewed one, which was Mr. Crockett, which again was a short that was adapted into a full feature. And we have another with Carved, which was a short adapted into a feature. Again, we didn't talk about this much with Mr. Crockett, considering that was a festival review, but I really gotta say, after watching Carved, I deeply appreciate what Hulu has done for these filmmakers, because it was a cool idea. You had told me about it maybe like 4 years ago or so when they first started doing this, 2019, about like the huluween thing, where they're like, yeah, we're making shorts and they're just going to be like a series of them, you can watch them, and I thought they were all cool. And then the fact that they're giving those same filmmakers a full carte blanche like budget to say, hey, make your full movie now, that's awesome. Like what a fucking triumph for Hulu. They're really knocking it out of the park.
Absolutely. It does have me excited because, sometimes when you have these shorts, and we've seen this a lot where we're reviewing a bigger film and then you go back and you watch a short, and the short has so much flavor to it. It has so much creativity to it, and you can really see what that director or writer idea was going into it. And then something gets lost in translation when you take that 10-minute, 15-minute short and you make it an hour and a half. It just feels unnatural. It feels like we're really adding in stuff just for the sake of adding things in and become a feature film. And that creativity, that creative stamp really does get lost. But as you said with Mr. Crockett, that was such a great review. I did not check out that short prior to watching that film. Carved, I actually did watch this one when it had debuted, and I was actually excited about this one. I love the concept of it. I thought it was rather unique. I thought it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. It was fun. And from what I remember, I think it had a decent amount of gore. I think they went, into the gory aspect just for that little short. I'll have to go back and revisit it. So as soon as I knew this one was popping up, I was like, is it still going to have that creative stamp? Mr. Crockett was such a positive experience, so I was hesitant about this one. And I know you kind of prepped me a little bit saying, teeters a lot in the comedy aspect of it. So I already knew maybe I would struggle with this one. But going in, I got to be honest, from those opening credits to the end credits, I had a really good time with this one.
I agree, man. This definitely, just like, we said it earlier with Mr. Crockett, how that one just feels like a classic, 90s, early 2000s kind of, hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to watch this Halloween special, but with a little extra edge to it. That's exactly what this feels like. I've seen some people who've already seen this because as we're getting this up a little later, we had a screener for it. But as you folks know, we've been very, very busy with all kinds of reviews on the channel. That this is one of those things where we finally got around to watching it. The comparisons are true when they say that this is like a Goosebumps episode for adults. Like it definitely has that harder edge, but there's still that fun creativity and still that kind of callback to what we all loved about Goosebumps and just how it was, again, horror for children. It's gateway horror. It's just got that perfect balance, I would say, both this and Mr. Crockett.
Yeah, they really do turn up that volume on the, I guess, adult aspects of this while still maintaining that childhood charm, I guess you would say, because they find this happy medium. And we talked about it in the Mr. Crockett review, where that has so many fun childlike undertones to it that we're very familiar with growing up, but then they really amp it up from that gore aspect. And that was something that was surprising about Carved. When we get into this one, and yes, as we open up, I was a little hesitant because it is pretty heavy on the comedy. There's a little bit of a, I guess you would say, dance sequence at one point in here, and I was almost checked out because I was like, if this is what I'm in store for, I just don't think this is going to hit for me. Maybe this was feeling more comedy horror, but it quickly takes a horror comedy route with some of that gore that we do see in a few sequences as this idea starts getting up and running, so to speak. they really do take advantage of those gory aspects, and it does maintain throughout. So that was something that was really surprising. It was a very happy surprise because the way that they utilize the pumpkin aspect of this while intertwining it with some creative gory kills was really intriguing to me because, again, as we said, sometimes that creative stamp is lost and it just doesn't feel like the magic they were able to capture in a short. But this one, through and through, except for maybe one sequence for me that runs a little bit long that we'll get into when we get a little bit into the negatives here, this one really did feel like we were able to maintain that creative stamp and really just kind of take that ball and take it 50 yards down the football field, so to speak.
Yeah, this was definitely one that I'm a little easier on the horror comedy, but when I was watching it, I was definitely I was so on the fence with you. I didn't know if this was going to be something where it's like, is this going to be acceptable? Is this going to be something that you'll kind of warm up to? I really hope so, because yeah, this was definitely a big win for me as far as horror comedy goes. I think even for me though, there are a couple of aspects, a couple of sequences that go a little, okay, I could use a little less here and there, but they totally make up for it. You're right with this horror. Like, I love this concept of this pumpkin. I think it is so ripe for just like small town horror. Yeah, right. Small town, like horror, like early Halloween, October vibes. I love the idea of this mutant pumpkin thing wreaking havoc on this little festival that they're doing. And I love all of it. Like the vines, the gore, the slime, everything they did just felt so fun and gruesome. And just, again, that perfect balance between, kind of leaning into the fantasy childlike thing that we all love about like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, but giving it that harder edge to it, so that way it almost feels like this movie, it's like very much meant for people in our age brackets. Like there's that 10-year span of people who grew up with this kind of stuff, and it's perfect for us.
Yeah, they were really able to tap into that DNA of what made something like Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps, what made that special as a kid growing up. And hell, we're adults, and I know I revisit that stuff all the
Oh
time
yeah.
just because they're just fun episodes. They're so digestible, and they have a funness about them. Even when you're dealing with some of the more terrifying episodes, it is not necessarily tongue in cheek, but it has that vibe to it. And I think Carved is exactly like that, where we can have this comedy, and I think the comedy here for the most part works. There are aspects as we start the film out that don't really work for me, but as we get into the deeper horror elements, it kind of owns what it is. There's a character in here, I think it's Shane, and he kind of
Mhm.
calls things out, and I think at some aspects I found myself chuckling when we were kind of getting into those horror elements, but he kind of like maintains some of the funness about him, or he's basically an asshole, and I think that really does work, especially when we're dealing with this group. And before I had dove into the actual film itself, I looked at the cast list, and we had actors like DJ Qualls and Chris Elliott in it. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, he does have two normal hands in this film, guys. So don't expect any strong hands. But this one, I was going into it expecting very heavy comedy undertones, and there is comedy again at the beginning, but I think it kind of lessens and lessens as we get further into it, and we really amp up the horror elements while still maintaining some comedy elements in those moments of levity. But I think it does work. I think they find that happy medium, which is really hard to do with horror comedies, but I think they did tap into it here, kind of using that DNA of a Goosebumps or a Are You Afraid of the Dark, and then kind of intertwining some comedy in there, and then obviously amping up those gory undertones.
Yeah, and I think one of the big elements that you got to work with in here that I found that I just really sold me, and again put me into these same vibes. It's kind of a similar to like a Dark Harvest. I was mentioning that before, where I love just the cinematography in this and how it does feel like a nice fall day in the middle of like Ohio. You know what I mean? Like it feels right. Everything looks exactly how it's supposed to. The leaves are falling, everybody's celebrating. And then also the practical effects. I mean, the practical effects in this are very well done. There's a little CGI here and there. You really can't get away with it, especially as we get towards the third act with where this pumpkin kind of goes, and how big things start to get. But I think that it's forgivable. especially for the tones that we're going with horror comedy. So, you don't have to sit there and like harp on it too long. So I can forgive that a little bit more. But yeah, I think that those two elements were just executed beautifully. I'm really interested to see what Justin Harding does going forward. I thought that this is a really nice, launching point, at least for me. I know he's done a few other films. We just spoke afterwards. He did a film called Making Monsters in 2019. So I'm curious to go back and see his other work and just see, if this is a fluke or if this guy's actually somebody to keep an eye out for.
And oddly enough, going into this, when I thought we were dealing with a lot of comedy, maybe an overabundance of comedy, there's an aspect in here that there was a kill in here that really, like, when you put yourself in the situation, was like, that's pretty wild and unique. We talked about In a Violent Nature, and how there's one particular kill in there that really everyone's going to be talking about, but for me, kind of varied because of the psychological aspect of it, and that one really resonated with me. There's one in here that, I don't really know, since we're not going into spoilers, but it's a pretty wild. Our character has a drink, so to speak, and just from that aspect of it, really, I found myself as we were watching it. We had moved past that point, and I was like, "Did I just watch what I just watched?" Because with those melding of comedy aspects, they kind of slipped in that kill there that was like, that is pretty dark. And honestly, that's what I love about this film, where it's like you can find some fun in it, you can find some horror in it, and you can certainly find a lot of gore in it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we said the same thing about Mr. Crockett, where there's a couple things in there that get really dark, like the subtext goes there, and I really think that I appreciate the direction that these huluween films are going, because again, they just feel like they work together. These two films are certainly going to be things I'm going to revisit. Both of these I'd love to have like on physical, like a nice little steel book or something to go with these. Like, I mean, I think that they just really knocked it out of the park this year with their Halloween content. So yeah, I think it's easy for me to say, but I think that Carved is a fun time. I think that if you again love things like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, if you like kind of seeing these almost childlike stories with a harder edge, I think that you're going to love this film, and I'm going to give this a recommend. I have no qualms about giving this a recommend and saying that if you're looking for something to watch the last weekend before Halloween, you're passing out candy. I know there's a lot of trick-or-treating going on this weekend. I'll be there with my son. This is perfect to throw on while you're passing out candy or just after. If you got some kids that are probably, 10, maybe 13 years old, this would be like a perfect film to throw on. Even though, yes, it's a little bit closer to the R-rated stuff, I think it's just on that border that it'll be perfect to introduce them to a little bit harder edged horror.
And really enjoying that short that had come out originally, and then going into this one with some hesitation, just thinking maybe that comedy was going to kill it, and looking at it, and my starting off the film being very hesitant about it, and really leaning toward, I don't know if this film's for me, and then they start amping up the horror elements and kind of shedding some of the comedy, but when the comedy's there, it's well used. The other issue that I had with this film was there's a sequence involving walkie-talkies that, for me, runs way too long. I think maybe they could have trimmed that up, especially for an hour 35 of a film. I don't know necessarily. It runs almost 10 minutes from the initial idea to implementing and kind of getting some sort of resolution there in the film. I think that sequence really did run long. I was actually watching it saying, this is going on a little bit too long. But other than that, I think the film runs fairly lean and mean, and there's, not a ton of wasted motion here. It really does facilitate the storytelling, and there's a lot of great gore in here with some funny elements. They really did find a happy medium. This is something that I'm going to definitely revisit. It's easily digestible. You can throw this on at any point in the time. This may start off my day of Halloween. I don't know. I think it's just so much fun. It really gets you amped up with the setting, the tone, just the idea in itself really gets you in the mood for Halloween. So this one, easy recommend. This is something you should be checking out. It's going to be in my rotation every Halloween at some point in the month of October. Just a lot of fun. So for me, easy recommend.
Yeah, guys, and this is streaming right now on Hulu. As we said, you can check it out right after watching this review if you want to, or like we said, you could save it for this weekend or make this one of your films you watch this Halloween. I think it definitely hits those vibes perfectly. And again, being two people who've grown up and lived in Northeast Ohio, it definitely it tickles all the right spots for somebody who's used to kind of that fall aspect and the pumpkin patches and the cornfields and everything. It all really works. It feels good. And at the end of the day, those are big points you're gonna get from us because hey, this is our season, baby. This is all we got. Other than that, we're just Florida 2.0. So we ain't got shit else. So give it that. Alrighty, folks, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of Carved. Let us know down below what you thought. And yeah, thank you so much for all the support you've been giving the channel. We got a lot more stuff to come as we're getting towards the big day. So keep it right here on Splattercast. And until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horse shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live.